Hi, everybody. So I'm sorry I got lost. This Crowdcast platform is still a little clunky for me, so forgive me for that. So welcome to, I guess this is Mahamudra for the People, session 19. So yeah, next week will be 20. I wanted to see if maybe we could sit for a bit to kind of ground ourselves and come back into a greater sense of spaciousness than I am in, having been kind of all over the cyber world. So, as we've done in the past, rely on whatever instruction has been meaningful for you with respect to how to anchor the mind. And so that can be through anchoring the mind through breath, anchoring the mind through an object in your field of vision, a visualized object, mind itself. And allow yourself to settle into this moment, holding loosely but presently Tlopa's 6 nails. So letting go of the past, letting go of any anticipation of what comes next, and even letting go of having to do anything in particular in this moment, putting down the need to analyze, putting down the need to do anything in particular, and simply resting. And we'll sit like this for 10 minutes. Okay. So if we can, take a moment to um, come back to this virtual meeting space and check in to see what that experience was like for you. And I want to just check in to see if anybody has any questions from last weekend. And that's okay if you don't, or if things come as they do, that's fine as well. I would like to come back to Shabkar's Flight of the Garuda for this series of instruction, or this, today session discussion or instruction. Sorry, I'm quite tired. So over the past couple of weeks, we've looked at beginning to explore that which arises in our meditation session, and using that as a means to be able to gain greater insight or wisdom into the experience of what mind is like. So in a real way, these instructions have been about deepening our sense of awareness into the present moment, and then explicitly being able to understand the continuity of mind essence that exists throughout all thought activity, throughout all physical sensations, and how these things might arise in ways where we experience them differently, like the difference between attachment and aversion. But as we begin to develop a closer relationship to these things by really resting into the experience of what they're like when they occur, gently holding them, and then gently letting them dissipate, and just, again, experientially learning about that process and experientially beginning to appreciate what's really there. And in the beginning, and for I also recognize that this group is constituted of people with a generally wide scope of practice. So for beginners, when we set out on these kinds of meditations, our own minds can be very unsettling and feel very. It's kind of like watching popcorn pop, where it just the process of watching, like this and that and that, and I'm going to do this tonight and tomorrow, and then yesterday I did this, and and it's just everything, and today I feel this way, and that's kind of coloring the general tenor of my experience. But in the beginning, all of that seems to rush forward, right? And we don't have a lot of experience in the beginning around what else is happening, right? And we have kind of very little grounding in being able to just sit in gentle observation of what's coming and going. And then also learning to recognize that the mind it's as if the mind, one of the mind's qualities is to be, almost like water. When you shake water up or create, motion with your hands in water, it creates waves, right? And so when we create activity consciously or unconsciously, that has this reactive rippling that occurs. And then when we're able to engage with whatever's happening in a non-reactive way, where we're not provoking, or we're not pushing away, or we're not seeking, or we're not changing the experience, eventually we begin to see that mind settles down to some extent. But not because we're making it settle. It's settling down because it is inherently settled. We're learning how to be less reactive. And so in the song that we're going to look at today, this is song number 11. I actually can't remember if these aren't named in this book. It's kind of a return to the experience of mind and appearance. And it's nice sometimes to kind of look at these instructions where it kind of gets into the like quote unquote nitty gritty of how we might relate to everything that's coming up right now, right? So in this moment, I'm feeling some kind of certain element of exhaustion and a certain element of there's a task I need to do immediately after this, and so I'm not really thinking about that, but I can feel its presence, and every other thing that arises, right? So rather than focusing on all of the appearance, we're going to look at what undergirds everything, which from the Vajrayana perspective, especially within the context of Mahamudra, is Buddha nature, kind of, quality of natural liberation. The mind is naturally liberated. The mind is naturally vast. The mind is naturally free. The mind is naturally expansive. And it's not that these are things that we are trying to hypnotize ourselves into remembering, we're actually trying to experience that. And through the repeated practice, quote unquote, because this is a practice, of coming back to this experience becomes much more natural and easily seen, and something that we can blend into our experience of the present moment, as we move through time. So as we have done in the past, I'm going to ask that everybody sit as comfortably as you can, and allow yourself to be meditative, right? So resting your mind, and allow the sound of the song just, again, hit your ear, and notice what the experience is like. So this is kind of like a listening meditation. And again, with all of these kinds of Mahamudra, instructions, it's important not to, relate to them legalistically. Right? This is not about the right way or the way in which, phenomena has to appear. But it's about allowing the experience of the song to help kind of massage us into this place of greater immediate experience. So this is song 11 from Shabkar's Flight of the Garuda. And on the this edition by Eric Pema Kunzon, it's on page 50. Emaho. Now listen again, noble heart children, that one's own mind, the creator of all these things, has tangible essence such as form or color, was not taught even by the Buddha. Primordially empty and ungraspable like the sky, it is certain that the mind is empty and groundless. Though one may use the sky as an example to point out the mind itself, it is merely an analogy to illustrate the emptiness aspect. The sky cannot illustrate the meaning of mind, since the sky is an empty and blank nothingness, devoid of cognizance. Mind, however, is empty, cognizant, and manifests everything. This is how mind is empty. From the natural expression of this luminous and empty mind, an unlimited variety of appearances arise. Though these arise like reflections in a mirror, there is no duality, since they are one in the state of being empty. Appearances and emptiness are primordially beyond duality. Since the mind is empty, appearances are unhindered. Within this emptiness, ungrasped appearances are vividly displayed. Appearance does not obstruct emptiness, and though it appears, its nature is primordially empty. For the practitioner who realizes that the non-duality of appearance and emptiness is like a rainbow in the sky and like the moon and water, all phenomena of samsara and nirvana are an illusory spectacle. When observing this performance of non-dual appearance and emptiness, the practitioner with unwavering mind is at ease. Is it like this or not, fortunate children? Between the emptiness and appearance of your mind, is it possible for you to make a division or not? Observe this, and then you will know that appearance and emptiness are primordially beyond duality. This is how appearance and emptiness are non-dual. This self-luminous, vividly clear, and keenly awake self-existing awareness, in which appearance and emptiness are non-dual, is the mind in which the three kayas are spontaneously present. Maintain it day and night in a continuous practice beyond sessions and breaks, my heart children. This is how non-duality is the nature of freedom. And I'm just going to come back to this one part. When observing this performance of non-dual appearance and emptiness, the practitioner with unwavering mind is at ease. Is it like that or not, fortunate children? Between the emptiness and appearance of your mind, is it possible to make a division or not? Observe this, and then you will know that appearance and emptiness are primordially beyond duality. So, there had been a question, but maybe it went away. It dissolved just like my mind. So, for somebody with very little meditation experience, this song in particular, I think, probably appears very abstract and hard to relate to. So we're going to unpack it a little bit. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. I think I just have a lot of friends. So the author of the text is Shabkar, Shabkar, and the name of the text is called The Flight of the Garuda. And this one is published by Rangjung Yeshe, and it's translated by Eric Pemakunzong. So let me get into this one. This one's a little tricky. So, there's this portion, and a lot of this is really couched in heavy metaphor. So, though one may use the sky as an example to point out mind itself, which is commonly done. So, they say the mind is like the sky, and often thought activity are like the clouds or kind of atmospheric things, is a way of pointing out that the mind, in and of itself, is vast, luminous, and undergirds, to some extent, the thought activity that arises. So since the sky is an empty and blank nothingness devoid of cognizance, so the sky cannot illustrate the meaning of mind because it's a empty, blank nothingness devoid of cognizance. Mind, however, is empty, cognizant, and manifests everything. This is how it's empty. And so this is the key point. So mind is empty and cognizant. Cognizant in the sense that we're aware of what's happening in the moment. Right? Even in the beginning of our kind of quote unquote, Mahamudra career, where we start off and thought activity is overwhelming. It's like, as they say, it's like a river passing, in a mountain gorge. It's just this kind of like almost violent, like kind of expression of constant thought activity. And yet there's something behind that experience, and behind might not be the best word, but there's something that kind of is woven throughout that entire experience, which is the ability to know, right? The ability to be cognizant, the ability to be aware of what is arising. So even in that huge kind of array of thought activity that happens when we begin, there is this awareness, this cognizance that's there. And then mind manifests everything. And that's because mind is a canvas through, upon which we experience joy and anxiety, dread and love, patience and anger. All of these things we experience on a daily basis. All of these things we may find, become part of longer, larger cycles of our experience. They all arise from mind, right? So this is how everything is created within mind. This is how everything manifests as mind, and this is how mind is empty. And then the cognizance is the ability to know and to be aware. So the song goes on, from the natural expression of this luminous and empty mind, an unlimited variety of appearances arise. So our best qualities, our worst qualities, our middling qualities, the impact of our senses. So the olfactory sense, smelling a flower, right, or smelling coffee, or smelling, and I have a scarf I bought in India many years ago, and it just has this smell that is, not only is it just unique to the scarf, no matter how many times I've washed it, it is like deeply soothing. So if I were to put my nose in the scarf, I would find myself feeling relaxed, feeling soothed, feeling even, feeling cared for even by the scarf. So things arise. An unlimited variety of appearances arise. Though these arise like reflections in a mirror, there is no duality, since they are one in the state of being empty. And so they're just happening. It's not that they're objects. And this is how appearances are empty. So when we experience appearance, be it the objects within our field of reference. Or let's say we're sitting out on the beach and looking out at the sea, at the horizon. Or let's say we're up on a hill or a mountain, looking out, again, also over the horizon. Or let's say we're in a place indoors. Everything that's arising is essentially arising as experience directly coming from the experience of mind. So visual form, the sense of smell, sensation, so touch, the auditory senses, the ability to hear, all of these things arise automatically. And there's no real self and other, because it's not that this thing is arising outside of the experience of our senses. Right? Whatever is arising in the moment and is being experienced. It's being known. It's, mind is cognizant of everything that's arising. And when we begin to rest into this experience, we rest into an experience that's very much transformed and very much different from the kind of experience that we typically have, where we're kind of being battered back and forth between like and dislike, between hope and fear, between what we feel we expect we should be, rather than who we actually are. That self and other kind of binary experience is something that tends to undergird most of our samsaric lives. Within this emptiness, ungrasped, appearances are vividly displayed. So they just happen. And since the mind is empty, appearances are unhindered. They just arise. Within this emptiness, ungrasped, appearances are vividly displayed. Appearance does not obstruct emptiness, right? So when we're able to sit in meditation and really get into this, right? What I'm seeing right now does not obstruct the natural arising of what's arising. What I'm seeing. The natural arising of appearance. Especially when we allow ourselves to put down this kind of binary relationship. And though it appears, it is empty, and its nature is primordially empty. For the practitioner who realizes that the non-duality of appearance and emptiness is like the rainbow in the sky and like a moon in water, all phenomena of samsara and nirvana are an illusory spectacle. And of course, the illusory spectacle piece, they're illusory. If we, it gets a little intense for people to, think that, everything I'm living through or experiencing or seeing or hearing or tasting is a spectacle. But this is where the power of Mahamudra is, because when we kind of experience things this way, we're able to directly experience, but without all of the heat and all the inflammation and all of the tension and all of the anxiety of self and other, which is typically manifests in desire or aversion to what's happening. I want more of this. May I be surrounded by more of this. I don't want this. particular experience. I hope I never experience this again. I hope nobody experiences it. And so this is this kind of deep settling that the Mahamudra tradition kind of, basically pushes us towards, is being able to understand that when we're seated clearly, deeply, in a settled way, not in a way that's settled because we are forcing it to be settled, but it's settled because we're able to allow everything to naturally settle itself by just being with it. We're not affecting change. We're resting into being, which is different. So before I go on, I want to see if anybody has any questions about this. I don't know if I'm being clear or unclear. As I mentioned, today's a little bit of a hazy day for me. And it's September 11th, which I don't know, it's not really particularly a challenging day for me, or anniversary, but it is like a dull feeling kind of day. The somber tone. Clear. Good. Okay. Well, then there are no questions. That's great. So then we can kind of go a little deeper into this. Beautiful. All right. You guys are a lot better than me. So I will just say this, though, that this line, for the practitioner who realizes that the non-duality of appearance and emptiness is like a rainbow in the sky and like a moon in water. All phenomenon of samsara and nirvana are an illusory spectacle. Is all. I mean, that's the whole thing in one line. Okay. So Jarrett asks a question. So this is unrelated to Flight of the Garuda, but a few weeks ago I remember you mentioned how we can bring Mahamudra to prostrations. I'm doing Nundro now, and I find myself having a hard time letting the creation of the visualization really be there. Feels like a manipulation. Maybe this is more about just feeling it out and leaning into and letting it grow with time. Yeah, I mean, I think. I think in the beginning with prostrations in particular, it's a somewhat elaborate visualization, right? There's the refuge tree, which is no small kind of visualization necessarily. And then there's your family and friends and all those people, and there are all the other beings, and there's the lake, and there are your enemies, and all of that stuff. Now, and then there's the refuge prayer that's recited as you do the prostrations. So one way of bringing Mahamudra into this kind of practice is the refuge prayer is being recited, right? And so there's kind of like an automatic generation of that kind of devotion. So, taking refuge in the precious root Lama and the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha and the wisdom deities and the assembly of exalted Sangha, all of the Dharma texts, all of that. So as you're prostrating, right, and doing that, the refuge tree is complete purity. Yourself as the practitioner doing, you could visualize yourself as Milarepa or as Vajrayogini or as Trauma or as anybody you want. As you're doing the prostration, there's no difference between who you are in the moment and the refuge tree and the entire group who is prostrating with you and the overall intention. So bringing Mahamudra into this is kind of like engaging in a sourceless activity where there's no difference between the act of taking refuge, the source of refuge, and the person who feels separate from the refuge itself. I don't know if that's helpful, but so one way of doing that, maybe in a more concrete manner, is letting go of this subject-object relationship to the entire act, right? And so the same really goes for everything, like with mandala offerings. As you sit there, with the rice and you're reciting, the mandala offering liturgy, and you have kind of the visualization up. Like, you're not offering something for the first time. You're not offering something that you don't have. You're not offering it necessarily even to somebody who has no separate nature than your own. And with the Vajrasattva, like, with the visualization, so, Vajrasattva is on the crown of one's head and you recite Vajrasattva's mantra. And the mantra itself is no different than Vajrasattva. Right? Vajrasattva is complete purity. As the kind of, the kind of blessing, kind of dutsi from Vajrasattva comes down and blesses you, there's no difference between you and Vajrasattva. So there's this way of resting into complete simultaneous experience with Vajrasattva while this process is happening. But the mantra itself is purification. Guru yoga is the same thing. So with all of these practices, and it doesn't really matter what the practice is, we can practice it. This is like, one of my root teachers kind of, hard instruction is, if you think you're an idiot, then you are. If you think that you're far away from the field of refuge, then you are far away from the field of refuge. If there's no division between yourself and the field of refuge, then the blessings are basically kind of, innately sparking off of one another. When we practice, mandala offerings, it's very easy for it to accidentally kind of be like this poverty mentality thing where it's like, oh, God, I'm offering so much stuff. When is everyone going to be satisfied? And it's not about that either. It's about, practicing into this kind of, singular experience of there being no difference between, the offerer to whom it's being offered and what is being offered. So I don't know if that makes sense. The one thing I don't like about Crowdcast is I can't see people's faces. I feel like I'm speaking into space. Okay. Well, there's your face. It's smiling. Good. Are there any other questions related to that? What is the Mahamudra experience of, say, a stubbed toe? by which I mean in moments of great surprise or duress, they seem to be the height of duality. But is it reasonable to assume that an advanced practitioner would ever eventually mute those experiences? So I think, the interesting word in that is mute. Mahamudra is not about muting. Mahamudra is about direct experience, right? And so, I have a teacher whose father was a kind of great alcoholic and died of his alcoholism, and that created a lot of sadness and remorse and anxiety for my teacher. And it's easy sometimes to assume that people who and my teacher happens to be like, this particular teacher happens to be one of the most powerful spiritual presences I've ever had a relationship with. It's so tempting to say that Mahamudra means, the practice, deep fruition of Mahamudra means we feel no pain. Right? But we do. The awakened being feels pain. The awakened being feels sadness. The awakened being feels remorse. The awakened being feels everything that we are so desperately trying to avoid or to mute, and this is a thing I think that is frustrating for people. I'm not saying it's frustrating for you, Brian, but I have seen this where, the intention with some element of practice can be to transcend or to avoid or to leave behind the messiness of life. And Mahamudra meditation, the proficiency in Mahamudra, does not remove the messiness of life. In fact, it creates certain other problems. But what it does do is it cuts through reactivity, so that when one is feeling grief or loss or anxiety, we're able to experience it. But then we're experiencing it with that same kind of spaciousness that Shabkar was talking about, and then in that Yutuk text that I cited, I think it was last week, where all of these things happen. The question then just becomes, what do we do? Do we get angry? Do we get, sad? We can get sad, and that's fine. We can get depressed. I mean, imagine, people like the Dalai Lama, or, many of my teachers who not only were great lineage holders of the tradition, but also upholders of a cultural set of practices that were almost destroyed by the Chinese. And I also like Putting Rinpoche, when I was staying with him in his retreat place in Sikkim on the border of Bhutan. There was no indoor plumbing, so you'd have to kind of go out to the outhouse, which was just basically like a little cement platform on the side of a hill. And in the evenings when I would go out there, I would kind of walk by the back of Putting Rinpoche's house, and I would hear him listening to Tibetan kind of classical music on a shortwave radio. And, he would just be kind of looking off into the distance. And, he was an incredible practitioner. And, all of these great teachers I'm sure to some extent, feel nostalgia or sadness or grief around what has happened to a country and a culture that they identify with and love that has been kind of, ripped apart. Um, so, in a way, like, and I'm kind of poking fun at Americans, and I'm one too. We have this like big opioid epidemic, and part of it, I think, is because we don't want to feel. And that's a real pitfall when we are engaging in Mahamudra or any kind of Dharma practice, because it's not about not wanting to feel. It's about wanting to feel more directly, but also to understand the process, what the process is involved in feeling, really. Not our kind of, standard, neurotic, reactive way of feeling. Like, what is deep love? When we love somebody and we love their presence and we love their wisdom and we love their laugh and we love how they change us. And then what is it like to love in a way that is rooted in control or rooted in fear of loss or rooted in attachment? So I don't know. I mean, I know people. Bokram Rinpoche died of a heart attack. And the one thing that I do feel very confident about is that, in going through this kind of major health event, I'm sure the first thing that he was trying to do was preparing himself for the dying experience. But he was in the process of rebuilding his monastery, and they were building a shedra, and there were a lot of projects that were unfinished. And so there may have very naturally been a desire to want to live longer. And I don't think that, the existence of that desire undercuts anyone's Mahamudra experience. So I don't know. I don't know if that's helpful, Brian. But then Sam writes, last week or the week before, someone, I can't remember who, described themselves as watching myself meditate. This really struck with me as describing something I experienced. How do we work with this temptation to turn watching what arises into a sort of backing away and kind of supervising our meditation? So in the beginning, again, like, when we were starting off and our mind is just, rushing with thoughts and anxieties and body pain and like, this relationship to time, like, when is this going to be over, kind of thing. We're caught like in this, like, very visceral place, even though we're meditating, where it's almost as if we're watching TV. I'm just like there, completely not necessarily aware of we're watching what's happening, but we're not cognizant of the of awareness and the spaciousness in what's happening. We're chasing, we're reacting, we're a little like freaked out, maybe. So as we become more experienced, and the experience really is just this process of sitting and watching and sitting and watching and experimenting with watching, that we begin to be able to experience and know, right, or learn that resting into the meditative experience is naturally, very gently letting subject and object melt away. Even if it's in an imperfect way, it doesn't have to arise, in a very profound, subject and object, kind of lack of duality. But a decrease in I am doing something, a decrease in I am experiencing something, a decrease in, oh, there's something I'm experiencing. And so I've been talking to people lately about kind of, modern Western Vipassana practices that involve labeling. And, I think they don't really necessarily help Mahamudra practice very often. And the Vipassana that we talk about in Mahamudra is different enough that it's non-conceptual. And so, labeling still kind of implies that there's something to actually label, right? And so what we're trying to do is kind of let go of that idea as well, right? To let go of all ideas. So right now, I'm sitting in front of a window, and my gaze is kind of between two slats of a set of blinds. And through there, I can see a row of bricks. And I just named all those things, right? But there is the ability to just sit with direct experience without labeling brick or slat or gap or window or sitting or Justin or whatever. And so a lot of this also has to do with this last line, Tilopa's 6 nails, rest, relax right now, and rest. And it's funny, I wrote this piece for Tricycle magazine on Tilopa's 6 nails, which I think there's a link to it on my website, justinwambledge.com. And I shared 2 other kind of, short resting instructions that I find, particularly beautiful. And one is to rest like a bee stuck in honey. And imagine, you're a bee buzzing around, around your hive, and then your wing just hits that honey, and then you're stuck, and then you're freaking out, and then the other one is stuck in the honey, and there's nothing you can do. You're just there. That kind of, just rest, the finality of resting. And then the other one is to rest like a worker at the end of a long day. Or when you rest, it's just profound, natural stillness. And when we're able to rest in that way, we begin to kind of put away self and other. We put away expectation. We put away preoccupation with what it is that we're doing. So I would encourage you, Sam, to to truly rest. And that resting, and this is also why, I think Cha can be a helpful kind of, other side to Mahamudra, because we begin to understand that resting is also cutting through conceptual elaboration. Deep resting is the process of cutting through this identity that is, and it always puts us in distinction or contradistinction to everything that arises. So just going back to this text for a second, and I'll come back to the other things written in the text box. when observing this performance of non-dual appearance and emptiness, the practitioner with unwavering mind is at ease. Is it like that or not, fortunate children? So, he's not saying like, this is the way it is, man. Like, just shut up. He's saying, look, test it, try it. Between the emptiness and the appearance of your mind, is it possible to make a division or not? Right? Division. Brick, Justin. Sluts, Justin. Window, Justin. Boring, Justin. Oh my God, it's Friday. Put it down. Observe this, and you will know that appearance and emptiness are primordially beyond duality. So, I'm going to get the text box first and then the question. And then I'm going to have to probably leave 5 minutes early. I have a meeting I need to prepare for exactly at 3:30. But so sometimes Sarah writes, sometimes non-dualism reminds me very much of current philosophy of mind around Al-Joshua Bach. A cognitive scientist once said, God is software that people download and run in the collective consciousness. It seems to suggest the same view of appearances, but maybe with some different ideas about how that's determined by the body. Yeah. And then Kyle says, I believe it was me who asked this question. It's been really helpful for me to literally just do nothing about anything. Yes, it's that resting, just putting it all down. If I notice myself observing myself, just gently disengaging from that and resting into presence. Yeah. Yes, yeah. No, thank you, Kyle. Then Astrid asks, is it possible to put the idea of emptiness of self in the context of these teachings? And if so, how can we use this in a helpful way in our practice and daily life without spiritually bypassing? So, this whole song is about experiencing emptiness of self. That one's own mind, the creator of all these things, has tangible essence, such as form or color, was not even taught by the Buddha. The mind doesn't have any qualities. Primordially empty and ungraspable like the sky, it is certain that the mind is empty and groundless. And so there's no, self in relationship to all of this is conceptual identity. Self is, and not that conceptual identity is necessarily bad. It's only bad, or bad isn't even bad isn't a good word. Bad isn't the right word. It's the wrong word. Language is, to quote somebody I know, language sucks. Identity arises, right? On some level, there's our physical form. I didn't create myself. Right? I'm a white male, and many other things. And so that part exists relatively right now. This form. And the more I constellate meaning and structure and concept around this, the more I create conceptual form and meaning, and structure and identity on everything else. You can't just create one. That's like this co-creation. By defining one thing, all things come into being. Right? By defining myself as this, everything else becomes that. And that's what dualism is about. By learning how to loosen up these concepts around self, we kind of take like a, I don't know if you've ever like had a one of those erasers that just doesn't erase so well. So you're trying to erase pencil mark, and all it is like a gray smudge. So it's like that. And when we begin to cut through a lot of the conceptual elaboration around self, in the initial stages, we create this kind of haze of experience with relationship to external phenomena. And the more we're able to crystallize the vision, like, in terms of its clarity, of there being the possibility of no conceptual relationship to self, everything comes into very clear focus as it is pure arising experience, free of all of the bullshit we project onto it. And so this is the funny thing. It's like we need to. Okay, thank you. My little DACA is. Okay, sweetie, I'm right in the middle. Can I just finish? Okay. So, the more that we have a conceptual identity and notion of maleness, in my case, whiteness, tallness, right? Whatever, Buddha, like Buddhistness, all this stuff, right? The more everything else has to be something else. And so when we look at this particular song, this song is very powerful in this. Even here, though one may use the sky as an example to point out mind itself, it is merely an analogy to illustrate the emptiness aspect. The sky cannot illustrate the meaning of mind, since sky is an empty, blank nothingness devoid of cognizance. Mind, however, is empty, cognizant, and manifests everything. This is how mind is empty. And this is how we are empty. When we're able to honestly and with freedom rest into experience in a clear, definitive, direct way, devoid of the conceptual projections that we put onto ourselves and put onto others. Like right now, we're like right on the cusp of an election. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. I like Trump, I don't like Trump. Like all of that stuff really, I mean, to be frank and I'm sure people may have a hard time with it. Like that stuff has very little bearing on our existence and just being. And that is also very scary because we invest so much into our identities. We invest so much in contradistinction to the identities that other people create for us. And so there's so much energy put into trying to display who we really are, failing to recognize that essentially everything is rooted in a very similar kind of experience at all times. And that's the thing that makes kind of, much of human activity kind of potentially tragic at times, because we create conflict where there doesn't need to be conflict. We create hate where there's no real authentic ground for the division that creates hate. We create misunderstanding because we tend not to be able to actually see directly what's arising. So I would say that the idea of emptiness of self is woven not only into the ink on the pages, but the paper of the pages, and then the eyeball, which has some kind of sense faculty that allows us to see the page, and then all the space in between. Appearances and emptiness are primordially beyond duality. Since the mind is empty, appearances are unhindered. Appearances are just able to arise authentically. So Astrid can arise authentically. Payne and Sam and Brian and Kyle and Sarah and George and myself all arise authentically. We're unhindered. Within this emptiness, ungrasped appearances are vividly displayed. We're able to arise in greater color than we ever have been able to. Technicolor, Maha Technicolor. Appearance does not obstruct emptiness. Then, though it appears, its nature is primordially empty. And again, coming back to this lovely, lovely, stanza. For the practitioner who realizes that the non-duality of appearance and emptiness is like a rainbow in the sky and like a moon in water, all phenomena of samsara and nirvana are an illusory spectacle. And that is what we are, an illusory spectacle. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to pause right here. I feel like this was a very meaningful session for me, at least. And I really want to thank everyone for being here. In this moment, I dedicate the merit from this practice to the liberation of all of Bhumi Sparsha Sangha, the liberation of all beings. I pray that suffering created by constant misapprehension of self and other be completely liberated. I ask that sound, smell, taste, and form, and texture all be completely liberated so that we can experience it directly with freshness and ease and beauty. But thank you all. Take good care.